order of the Canby Planning Commission for November 22nd, 2021. How's that sound? I think we have a quorum, so no problem there. So we'll start with our invocation. And so we'll get right to it. Tonight we gather to work for the people of Canby, to make good decisions that will make Canby a great place to live and work. But tonight, I think we could all send out a prayer to the folks in the state of Wisconsin and pray that the wounds inflicted on their community will heal quickly and that people will come together in love and that peace will soon be restored. In your name, amen. We'll have the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for attending and being there and volunteering. How are you doing this evening, James?
I'm doing well.
Good.
Just got home from work in time.
Oh, well, I hope you managed to eat a burrito or something, So hold on just a second. I'm having technical issues myself. So we have no consent items. At this time, we will have citizen input on non-agenda items. Lainey, do we have any citizens that would like to speak at this time? I'm going to take that as a no. There's no new business. And so we'll move right on to the public hearing, which is for Okada America, a site and design review lot line adjustment application for the property located at 368 and Sequoia and 372 South Sequoia Parkway, was scheduled to be heard on this date, but the applicant, Okada America, requested that the hearing be delayed until a date certain of Monday, December 13th. So what we're going to do is having a work session this evening. And Don, why don't you take it away from there?
Thank you, Chair Savory. Yes, did we need to vote on that, John, for the Okada, or just we're just recognizing that it's being extended? Okay,
yeah.
December 13th. Okay, thank you. So on the work session, this is a follow-up to the work session we had, joint work session on the zoning framework update and the transportation and traffic information that was presented. My apologies that there wasn't enough time to really kind of get into the traffic and transportation. And part of what I'd like to hear from the commissioners tonight is additional items that would be of interest, because we will reschedule another work session. This will be specific for DKS. It'll be just them and topical items that you guys would like to dive into deeper as part of the transportation discussion. I'm happy to provide that to DKS. Also, if there are items that were covered, and I can kind of go back through that again, on zoning code updates, if you have questions on those, both near term and longer range zoning code updates, those both would be items that would be of interest for us. So I just wanted to, part of it is to give you a chance to speak and to just have a kind of a free form tonight regarding that. And then there'll be another work session we'll probably schedule in January. So with that, Chair Savory, I'll turn it back to you.
Well, my initial, and I'm sorry the DKS didn't have more than, it seemed like a split second the other night. That was unfortunate. But the thing that strikes me and has for quite some time is the disconnect between DKS and their data and the public perception of our traffic situation. They tell us everything is fine, that that we're not overloading or overstressing our transportation system. And yet you talk to almost any citizen that lives and works and drives in Canby, and they would disagree with that. I talked to a lot of people, and nobody thinks that our traffic situation is good or even marginally good. So that's the main thing that I would, when you talk to DKS, tell them that you might impart to them that's the concern of most of the people that I talk to.
And I think, John, Commissioner Savory, that is something that they will obviously dive into further and about how that's being done. I think part of the problem is that the level of service standards that have been adopted by the city as part of the transportation system plan, that those levels of service standards, I think people have experienced very favorable traffic flow over the years. And because of development that's happening, you're experiencing less favorable traffic flows. That less favorable traffic flow still may fall within the standard that was adopted in the transportation system plan. And I think that's the part that needs to be a deep dive when DKS comes back and goes through that analysis to explain that. So it's not that people, I think part of this is the perception of what it should be versus what it has been adopted to be. And those are different levels of experience. And obviously people that live in the city, when you've experienced things over time and you can visualize and experience traffic, I acknowledge it is real. And I think, there's frustration that comes with additional traffic, et cetera. The question is it within the standard that was adopted? And I think that's the part that maybe needs some explanation about what levels of service, what are they? When you look at levels of service and when you look at volume to capacity, which is another way of looking at level of service on 99E, and that's what ODOT looks at. What does that really mean, in terms of like what your experience is with the line of cars in a AM or PM peak hour situation? So I think a point well taken, and that's something that I will obviously pass on. And I think it could be a further discussion about that, about what that is. And Chair Savory, Commissioner Hutchinson has a question as well.
Sure.
Hi. Thank you for your time, and I really appreciate all the work that you've done on getting these long-term plans rolling and chasing after money to help. It's really kind of been wonderful. We're kind of like, I would look at the date on those documents and I would think this is something we really need to oh my God, look at the size of that packet, and I would completely forget about it entirely. And I really appreciate you guys continuing to bring us and council's focus onto these issues and being proactive about them. As far as transportation is concerned, and I too think that, we could do at least an entire meeting with DKS. There's some things that I feel like when we do internal studies of how the city operates, and I think my personal experience, I live on 12th between Holly and Ivy North Side. And then when I was here, first moved here, our street was vacant. And then a development went in about, 3 blocks to the west of us. And all of a sudden our street became a popular way to get from Ivy to that development. And our traffic went from non-existent to mostly non-existent, which really in our perception was huge, all of a sudden there were people going through here on their way to somewhere else. And that was just new all by itself. And so that I understand, and that seems completely within the scope of DKS. What I have problems understanding is it's like, we look at things as a city, and then there's a county around us that is responsible for certain roads and the analysis thereof and management thereof. And sometimes that goes inside and out of the city. And then we've got the state that's in a similar, position where they're in charge of 99 rolling through town And, they may look at capacity in a different issue. And then we've got the interstate over there, which, between the time when I moved to Canby and now, it turns into a parking lot at strategic times of the day. And it seems like that has had huge effects on the amount of traffic that ends up going up and down 99. And I'm not sure that I don't see how those larger issues factor into our local picture when we talk about these things, because the way I see the analysis, it's all very logical, but it's also very local. And so that's kind of something that I would really enjoy looking more into.
And one aspect of that, I think that clearly is in play, the regional side of things that we are tracking, working with DKS on this as well, is speaking of that, is what will tolling do to diversion and those kinds of things through the city of Canby. And that's something that's a critical thing for us as well, because that would only add additional traffic through the city. And we're working with ODOT and their consultants to, go and define what those items are in terms of what that is. Those studies have not been completed, but we do know that there will be diversion, and that's more of a regional issue because some people will not be wanting to pay the tolls that would happen on I-205. How much that will be and what those percentages are, those haven't been determined, but on a regional scale, I do think that there are things that do happen. And I hear what you're saying about the other part of this is, are there issues of regional significance, perhaps even on a project level, about, where do the trips come from and how they're distributed. And I think that's another context issue that I think is important. The DKS can talk about how do they come up with those assumptions, and some of those are built in, as far as I understand, from the applicant's perspective about what their trips, where they're going to be coming from, how many of those are going to occur, or either factored into a traffic study prepared by the consultant team or by DKS. And a lot of the companies do hire DKS to do the traffic study instead of hiring it out. So I think there is some continuity, at least from the overall kind of modeling perspective. But another aspect of that is the modeling that DKS is doing in the city. So I think those are, I can't really go into a lot of detail on those, but I think those are all important issues: the trip distribution, the modeling, and then things like the ODOT tolling and what those anticipated items would be and how would those be tracked. That would fit into the transportation system plan for sure. I mean, we would definitely be the transportation system plan update that's anticipated, that I would like us to be under contract for that this time next year with the comp plan update at the same time, so that we can actually have a little more grasp on some of those issues that are more regional, which we at this point don't have all the information. Hopefully that helps.
It does, but I would ask, do you have any, speaking of tolling, do you have a sense of what that's going to look like for us? I know without actually getting into a really detail, but I'm a sense of how that's going to work for us.
I think that the main issue, Commissioner Savory, is I don't know what the quantity will be, but I think the issue for us, the challenge here is that how do we have that extra traffic come in, and when we get to situations where the level of service essentially is at level of service F, which is the volume to capacity is above 1 on the approaches to 99E, what is the fix? And what is the contributing factor that the tolling will provide? If there's diversion that happens, will that throw over some of the intersections on 99E into what's called exceedance? And how do we address that issue about that? Or how does ODOT address that issue about that? In other words, they're adding trips that would not normally be in our system. For example, a private project that happens, that's rather quantitative in some ways because you have a set of employees, you have a set of, say it's a distribution facility, you have a set of distribution times, those kinds of things happen. So not really answering your question specifically because we don't have the data yet from ODOT, but I think what I really want us to have, and this is something I'm discussing with DKS now, is working alongside ODOT to provide at least our information on where our baseline is for the intersections that we're looking at in the system. And then that at least gives them the baseline, and then ODOT can come back because it's really going to be up to them to say what that is based on their environmental impact statement study. And then with that being a contributing factor, my question is, where does that put our critical intersections on 99E? And ODOT is supposed to have some mitigation associated with their project as well. How much of that really will be in play is another question. Some of that is tolling will end up creating a fund source for those kinds of things. But I'd like the city to be ahead of that curve in saying to ODOT, we understand this is the quantitative assessment we would like on these intersections, so we know for sure, because it has a bearing on our development as well, because if it's suddenly at an exceedance level, what does that mean for project development and our urban growth boundary expansion? Those kinds of things are affected by that. So I get a lot of information there without a lot of detail of exactly what that means, but I think all those things are going to have to be kind of measured and weighed out so we know what those impacts are.
Is Commissioner Boatwright with us? Do we know?
I am not sure.
I don't see him on
I've
here.
tried to get him on here, but I don't think he's having any luck.
Okay. So James, Commissioner Heeb, what are your thoughts on this? I think this is the critical issue for Canby going forward, is how we're going to manage the traffic. We've got a lot more coming on.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what exactly would be within our purview of responsibility per se, because I know that with the tolling that's going to happen, it's definitely going to push traffic through Canby. And then I know that there's that interchange that's planned down south by Brooks, I believe, that's going to supposedly divert some traffic. So it can avoid 99E, but I still see Canby being a bottleneck. And a lot of it, it sounds like we have to go to ODOT over and, I don't know, maybe lobby some, House reps down in Salem, but I don't really know. I don't know that we're going to be able to address any of that. What I do say that we have an effect over is things like, it would be Southwest 2nd Street, right there where that project that we approved that I still think that's really tight on all those property lines. That should be probably a one-way road, with the traffic coming from the high school and the way that road doesn't go through in there anymore. The traffic flow there we can control, and it's already hard to get down that road. And then there's things like the Walnut Street extension. Last I heard, it's it was a 4-year plan. I know that we have Amazon coming in down that road that's supposed to increase it by 1,000 trips a day. And once that all hits the ground, those traffic, that's going to overburden Sequoia for sure. And last I heard was that the property connecting 99E from Walnut wasn't annexed into the city yet. And I don't know if the city council has done that yet, but that's something that we could get moving faster, is getting stuff like that. But as far as like the toll booths and all that, I'm not a big fan of them, but I don't really know where we can impact the decision. But I see some of these smaller roads being in Walnut in particular with Amazon coming, where we should really focus some time. But
Well, I think that, to your point, I think that roads like Territorial, Ivy, there's a Birch. Those are the roads, those side streets. People are not dumb, and they're going to find a way. They're going to find the path of least resistance to get from point A to point B, and those are the neighborhoods that are going to be impacted. I know that Birch, where Commissioner Patton lives, and where near where I live, that's going to be heavily impacted. People are going to get off of 99. They're going to go down to Territorial. They'll hit either Ivy or go all the way down to Birch and cut on over. That's what I anticipate. Anyway.
yeah, I agree. I see a lot of traffic being diverted onto Birch also. I happen to live about a block down from Commissioner Patton, and it's a lot of mornings whenever my wife would be driving my kids when they went to public school, when they were back pre-COVID days. We wouldn't be able to take left off of Birch on the Knightsbridge Road. We would often have to take a right and then go up and do a U-turn and come back, just because of how much traffic hits that intersection trying to avoid 99E. And I know it's only going to get worse when the tolling comes around. So it's but I if I remember correctly, I believe somebody had said in the past that it was either Holly or Ivy was supposed to be where the route that people are taking off of Territorial and then connecting with Knightsbridge. And I don't see it doesn't seem like a like a contiguous route for people to take. It's seems like sidewalk ends and it looks undeveloped, and then it goes back to nice road again, and there's a lot of patchwork, it seems. And I don't know if it's really clear to people driving through what would be the preferred route.
Well, I don't think that people are really looking at a straight line situation where they're looking at how much time it takes. Time is the factor. How much time does it take to get from 99 and Territorial, drive down there, take a left onto Birch or Ivy or Holly. I think it might be Holly, and then hit Knightsbridge from there. And I think that people will look at that. They don't care if it takes more distance. What they care about is how long they're going to be sitting in traffic, and whether it's a perceived a perception thing, or whether that's the reality. I think time will tell, but I fear that our little side streets, like Holly, like Birch, are going to be swamped. That's my fear.
Chair Savory and Commissioner Heave, just a few points that as we get DKS back into the work session, and just back to a few of the points, and I probably won't cover these all to the degree that they need at this point, but the Walnut Street extension, there was one slide that I brought up that it looks like it's a 9% projected decrease with Walnut Street to Sequoia and a 3% projected decrease to Territorial. What those numbers really mean what those percentages really mean in terms of numbers, I'm not sure. In terms of traffic volume, that's something obviously that will be critical is to get Walnut in play. That's something that's high priority for the city to get on the ground. So I think that will be a significant reliever of congestion in the industrial park area. That's one item. Commissioner Hebe, to your point about localized streets, I think that's another piece that, whether it's second or third, I think that's something that Transportation System Plan Update needs to look at is, what should those be? Should they be two-way? Should they be one-way? Part of this gets into what is the standard acceptable roadway standard, the cross section. The city has standard templates now for what cross sections look like. Every city has their own decision-making process about what is acceptable. You can see some examples in more urban areas where there's even smaller roads, parking on both sides. And in some cases, there's only one actually travel lane. That's not where we're at on second or third, but the question becomes how should that work? And holistically, how should those function? I think that needs to be looked at as an entirety of the system. There are some things that are fairly long-term as well and this is part of maybe looking at the TSB, but it's a 20-year document. Would things like the Arndt Road extension, and this would require a lot of revenue to happen. Clackamas County is currently reviewing two things. One is the connection to Barlow, which is an immediate issue. They're also looking at the kind of longer range issue about a possible flyover over the Molalla River that would end up providing better access out of the city. That again is not something that's going to go into a real deep dive. Kittleson Associates is doing that work for Clackamas County. City staff is on the advisory group, or that they've set up stakeholders for that. So we are hearing what's happening. There's still going to be a number of other meetings happening. That's a longer range kind of plan for that. And then the last point on the localized streets, I would need to ask DKS for their input on the concern regarding not wanting local streets to be overwhelmed with traffic, and how do we keep up with that? So they're all good questions. They're all good points. I don't have the detailed answers, but I'm taking notes here so that they will be able to dive into that.
So, Commissioner Patton, do you have some input on this?
Yeah, I talked quite a bit the other night, so I wanted to give other folks a chance before I said anything. So, just some stuff I've written down here. I think Don kind of touched on this. There is the difference between the perception of what is and isn't acceptable traffic is very different from what the system is built to withstand. And that whole thing about, I'm used to only 5 cars coming down my street. Now it is 20. It is horrible, but really that street is built to handle 500 cars. This is one of the push and pulls that, as essentially liaisons of the city to the community, that we find ourselves in. And I think it's important for us as commissioners to have this information and a clear understanding of what those levels are, so that when those citizens come to us and say, hey, I've got all this traffic coming down my street, it's horrible. We can then, instead of nodding our heads and saying, oh, I completely agree, kind of serve as an advocate and an educator to say, look, I completely understand. This is really rough, but here's some of the things that are taken into consideration because of that. Really, the street can handle X amount of traffic. It's coming from this area and that area. These are some of the things that we're doing to try and, look at this moving forward. As the city grows, it is going to be important for us to be those advocates to help educate people on what's happening so that people just don't sit at home angry as they watch cars go by their street. For the Walnut Street extension, I believe the last city council meeting I stayed on after our work session, and they actually did approve what some of the it's not right-of-ways, but the acquisitions, the land acquisitions to really kind of jumpstart that project. And I think they were saying that that's supposed to start, within the next year or so. So I know that was one of the things that they approved at the last city council meeting was moving forward with some of the right-of-ways for that street. And then one of the things, Commissioner Heeb, yes, how it's supposed to work is they're supposed to go, how the system is set up is it's supposed to go from Knightsbridge to Holly to North, to Territorial, not down Birch. And I think a lot of it has to do with it's just a turn that people know takes you ultimately to Territorial. And then I haven't done it of late, but I also think the GPS takes you that way. And I think it would behoove the city to work with Google and some of the other GPS companies to see if they can change that. I believe that you have the ability, like municipalities and stuff have the ability to contact them and make changes to those maps and try and dissuade people from using those streets by classifying them certain ways. So things that I would like to see from DKS, I'd like an understanding of how far out their projections go. So let's say we approve an annexation for 165 homes, but we know that there's another piece of acreage that in the next 2-3 years is going to have another 100 homes. Okay, with the traffic that this one that we are annexing in is okay, how will that play into when the other annexations come into the system? So not just what we're looking at right now. So we have this many street, this is the level of traffic on the street. This annexation is going to create X amount of traffic. Everything looks good. Okay. But when these other ones that are further out come online, what does that bring into the system? I would like to know if they are looking at that future development. So obviously over here in like North Birch down by the ferry and stuff, there's not a lot of land that's going to be annexed in. So what those projections would look like for the future are going to be very different than what you would see on like Canby Markham Highway or Holly or out near the industrial park. I would like an understanding if they are looking at that broader picture going further out. Something else that I would really be interested in is clear. We live in an age of visualization. We want to see things visually. And I am curious if we can create a visual presentation for what these things look like. So I know that for the grading of the streets, because I get this once in a while for the street maintenance fee stuff, the streets are colored green, yellow, and red, depending on what their grade is for the street surface itself. Is there a way to take our street system and do something similar where it's to say, okay, this street has a standard of X, currently it has this much traffic, it would be green or it would be yellow. And then look at that in different segments. So this is what it looks like in the morning. This is what it looks like in the afternoon. This is what it looks like in the evening. So that when we actually present this stuff to the public, there's something that they can look at, and it just gives us all kind of a visual of what that ultimately looks like. Because when you tell somebody, yes, this is going to add 500 trips. Now, these are just theoretical, but, yes, this is going to add 500 trips. There's currently 250, but the street can take 1,000. When you start talking in numbers like that, it's hard to really visualize what that looks like. So if there's some way that we can make that into a visual map or something that we can kind of chart that out, I think that would really help in educating us and the community as to what those standards really actually look like. Something else that has kind of come up here to me in the last little bit is with the industrial park, I really think that we need to look at South Haynes Road. I think there needs to be some emphasis on the traffic study given to that street. I know that traffic going into the industrial park is not supposed to be using South Haynes Road, or it's Haynes, right? Not Hines.
Haynes.
Yeah, South Haynes Road. But some of them are. And, rather than, and I guess I'm a pragmatist when it comes to this, rather than like sticking signs up to say, don't do this or whatever, if there's some way that the city can work with the county to say, look, we need to prioritize the development of the street because it is ultimately it is going to become a way to get into the industrial park. That land out there is some of the last little bit of land that can be annexed into the city for development. And so rather than waiting until people are complaining about that street after houses and businesses are built on it, it might make sense to really kind of dive into it and see what can be done with it now rather than waiting until later. I'm a big fan of trying to head things off before they become a humongous problem. Another thing I think would be very good is if DKS and the city could generate some sort of annual report as far as the health of the traffic in the city. So annually a report is generated to say, hey, overall, this is the level of traffic that the city is used to, or this that we had before. This is where we're at now, and this is how it stacks up to what the system is prepared for. And then call out specific bullet points to say these are some of the things that we have short-term, long-term that we're doing to help ease some of the traffic that you might be feeling. Some sort of, I know a lot of times people don't really read them or care about them, but a lot of the vocal people do. And I think if you can arm the citizens with that information, then they can also become advocates for the city as well. So that when they are talking to their neighbors and someone's complaining about the traffic on their street, they're like, oh, well, didn't you see that annual report? It said that, yeah, it's kind of a mess, but these are the things that are happening. I have these conversations with my neighbors all the time, and they'll oftentimes come to me and they'll say, why is this happening? And I'll explain to them what's going on. And when I'm done, they're kind of like, well, I don't really like it still, but at least I now understand why this thing is happening. Another thing that I think we need to look at as far as the tolling goes, I know that there has been talk that ODOT and I guess the county has a plan to, whether it's like a roundabout or something out there by the Aurora Airport to help sort of funnel traffic from I-5 to 99E and stuff. I know that is a long-term plan, but if these studies come out and start to show that tolling is going to create a lot more traffic on 99E, I really think it would make sense for the city to start talking to those entities now and saying, and at least planting the seed that, hey, if this tolling is meant to help generate funds to maintain these roads, then maybe you need to pony up a little money now and do this project sooner than later, because what you're planning to do up here is going to affect things down here. And so let's start working towards that now. So if there's any way to at least do some of that work before that happens, I say let's push it. It's sort of like the streets that the city annexed, or the streets that the city took over from the county. The city for years has been badgering them about these streets, and finally, we got money for those streets. Granted, it wasn't enough to do all the work, but they finally ponied up, and it's because it took, the city was persistent and continued to badger them. So I say it's sort of like in the Shawshank Redemption, he kept writing letters to get money for the library. And when he got a little bit more, he wrote more letters. Let's do it. Let's pester them until they tell us to either shut up and go away or give us this beautiful roundabout to help alleviate some of this traffic. And as far as streets that I think really need to be looked at when it comes to this tolling project, some of them are like Barlow, South Arndt Road, on to Knights Bridge, North Birch, North Holly, and Northeast Territorial, because that is sort of the northern loop. But also, I think Southwest 2nd Avenue is going to see trouble because people are going to start at one end or the other on 99E, and they're going to want to get off of 99E and travel down, Southwest 2nd through that residential area to try and pop out either down by the Safeway or up by the Fred Meyer gas station. And then also I foresee Southeast 13th Avenue also having some trouble. People taking Southeast 13th Avenue at Safeway, going all the way back behind Hope Village, even though it seems crazy, they do it with Territorial, and then popping out, weaving their way down through Redwood Street there by the school, and then popping out there by Fred Meyer. So I think as far as streets that I feel really need to be kind of looked at for this tolling thing, those are the ones that pop up on my list. I think ultimately it just comes down to transparency and education and understanding that, DKS, it's one thing to tell us that everything is all well and good, but we really need to be armed with data and facts so that when we have these conversations, we can educate people about them. And I think that was all I've got on my list at this point in time.
Commissioner Patton, great list. I won't go through what you just said in its entirety, but I absolutely love the idea of the visual map, and I think that's a level of service issue. I'm not sure which method that would be best to show that in. Coloration is one way. I actually have seen models where there's simulated traffic and you can see the cars going through an intersection. That may be quite expensive to do, so I don't want to necessarily throw that on the plate, but I've seen that with really big projects and where that actually is showing the individual cars and the modeling that goes with those and what that looks like. I 100% agree that I think people have a really hard time quantifying cars with, the volume and how does that fit into a road system and, what does that even look like? It sounds like, a release from Autzen Stadium to them after the Ducks football game. I mean, that's the reality of what people are visually thinking, when the reality might be that actually it's very well accommodated, depending on what the numbers are. So those are really good points. I agree with the educational part. The annual report thing, I think that's something that we clearly should be giving more information. How that fits into our TSP update, is that something we can do beforehand of that, or absolutely when we have a TSP? I think these are components I think we need to have more detail on. All good points there. And I think that the point about, the tolling and asking for things up front, we're trying to get ahead of that curve to the extent that we can. It's kind of a big animal. The whole tolling thing covers multitudes of areas, but we are definitely tracking that. And I think the critical functionality here is how does it affect Canby is the foremost important thing for us. So those that probably didn't cover everything that you mentioned, but I just wanted to echo that, those are great points, and those will be passed on.
Commissioner Hutchinson, do you have some input for this?
Well, I see a lot of negatives for our community, and I see a lot of money flying around out there. Money from the tolls, which is supposed to mitigate the effects of the tolls, among other things. And I'm not really sure, I mean, how much of this is politics and how much is planning. But, if we would be willing to put up with it for the sake of an overpass over the railroad tracks, what would happen? Is anyone seriously thinking about a bridge over the ferry track? And then, we've got this infrastructure package that's flying down, and does that bear on any of our conversations at all? So I guess I'm just thinking, I see money. How can we get some, and how can we use it to mitigate some of the negatives that we're going to be suffering from what we see coming down the pike?
And Commissioner Hutchinson, I think that one of those items, obviously the infrastructure package is one that everybody is kind of looking at as to what that might mean for targeted funding. It's quite a large sum each state is receiving. And that could be very well something that I think there should be more collaboration between the city and the county on one level for sure as to how that starts to be looked at. Obviously, the county, whatever deficit they have for their study for the Barlow-Arndt road system for their near-term work, that would look like something that would obviously be one that would be probably in play here. Are there others that should be looked at beyond that? And then I guess the question is, since that hasn't really landed as to what that really means, but how does that get divvied up in terms of projects throughout the state? And I completely agree with you. The tolling funding is something else, and that's kind of hard to get a grasp on. I think there's probably going to be obviously more need than there is money based on that. And then ODOT is talking about obviously collecting revenue over time. But I would rather have the money up front so that we can address those issues beforehand, not subsequently. It is a pretty large project and kind of hard to necessarily get detail on, but I think, again, those are all good points. If we can get infrastructure money, that would be great, because that would solve a lot of the issues that we're now facing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Chair Savory, if I may, real quick.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah, as far as us getting money out of the whole tolling thing, I think it will be like squeezing blood from a turnip. They're going to lock that fund. The only way that they're going to be able to keep that on the rails is if they lock that funding up so that it goes towards maintaining the highway that it is tolling. That is kind of the purpose of those things. But I would love to be proven wrong. The other one, and this is for Counselor Hutchinson or Commissioner Hutchinson, regarding the railroad overpass. Actually, when I was on City Council, we had discussed using urban renewal funds to build an overpass over the railroad track that would go between this Walgreens and the Space Age and come out there by the skate park over by the police station. So that way the police would have a way of getting across the railroad tracks. But that project never saw the light of day, along with some others that were originally planned.
Was that due to a lack of money, a lack of political will?
Lack of political will. There was plenty of money there to do those projects. It was decided not to do them.
What was the excuse at the time? Or are you feeling? I don't want to put you on the spot, but
no, there was a change in the guard at City Council, and it was decided that funding mechanism should not be used anymore, and so that's what killed a lot of those projects.
Okay, thank you,
Commissioner Patton. Just so that you're kind of all the commissioners are aware, but in particular to your point, that was the piece I had mentioned that Kittleson Associates working with Clackamas County, and they're looking at that conceptual alignment, and it may not be where the police station is. It may be further towards the west for this is kind of just very, very high level, but that still is something that's being looked at long term. In terms of the degree of engineering review of this, very high level, but it has not gone away from people's radar. Obviously, the county is aware of it, and they're tagging it on to their Barlow Road project, even though that's not what they're trying to pay for. Like, it's another piece to this, and they're looking at kind of a long term. So I could absolutely be happy to keep you in the loop on how that's going. And I mean, if you're interested in the details of that, I'd be glad to share them.
Yes, and I know at times I kind of blur the line between what the planning commission does and what the council will do, just because I have an interest in those things. So if at any point in time I start to do that, and you need to say, Jason, no, don't talk about those things, that is not our thing. You just have to tell me, because I'm passionate about this stuff and I will just go off on a tear. So you just got to let me know.
Well, this is an open dialogue at this point, so we're not really setting any policy, but I think that this is stuff that I think is a broad brush for the whole city. And as we get into this, obviously, some of these, obviously funding choices would be the council level items, but to talk about them, I think they're really part of the transportation system. So I think they're all fair game.
So is there anything else that you feel we should be talking about this evening? Don?
The only other thing would be, I think, if there were questions regarding, and I covered some items which on, the zoning code updates, those will be coming to you folks for recommendation to council. We are going to try to get a number of those clipped off the list in 2022. The bigger items that have to relate to housing needs analysis, housing production strategy, and the economic opportunity analysis, they're going to be happening over 2022. Some of those are going to need to wait for some of the analysis to be completed for us to make other changes to the code, to the zoning code and zoning and development code. But if there are near-term things that we did not address before that you're interested in, we'd be open for that as well.
Okay.
With those studies, is there does the city have like a Gantt chart of the start completion times for those? Like, are they in a Gantt chart to see when they start, when they're supposed to complete, what different phases there are, so we could just kind of visualize what that is?
And those are excellent questions. And yes, the answer is yes, there will be. And if I could ask for December to get through that, I think that we will have most of that scheduled and we could share it immediately out, because that's the question I have as well to the consultants is, give me the milestones. Where are all those pieces going forward for the HNA and HPS? And then I'm also expecting that we're going to get funding from DLCD on the economic opportunity analysis. It may not be at the level that we were asking for, because the state started running out of money, and they called me and said that we had already received so much money, they weren't even sure why we were getting more money. I'm kind of paraphrasing, but so it's like I had to kind of, finagle that and say, well, we started it before, and like it's critical to our comp plan update. And they said, okay, and there may be some maps that the city might be able to do for money set aside for economic opportunity that we've already got. And they said, yes, okay. Then they got back to me and said that, yes, we will give you some money. So I need to get the consultants on board for that as well. And that probably would be end of December, might be beginning of January. But that's a critical path for me personally, because I want to know what that means, because there's a ton of like involvement with advisory groups, et cetera, that will be going forward for those projects. And so it's a lot to kind of manage over a year. And that's critical for planning staff to know what that is as well. So yes, we'll share those out once we have them.
Okay.
Hey, any money you can get from them, just keep squeezing the turnip, Don. Keep squeezing the turnip.
Well, from everything that I've read lately, the state is awash in money to the tune of $765 million, $1 billion. Hell, it's a lot of money that they have extra that they weren't expecting. Tell them that the city of Canby sure could use that.
Yeah.
I will.
If I wanted to like go bug ODOT at public meetings or go like, I don't know, get involved on some of that other stuff, what would be an avenue to do that? Just
Commissioner Hebe, I can share with you. I think the best forum, there are forums that they do, like open house forums, etc., that they will be having, and I'm glad to share that out to all the commissioners. There was one that they recently had, and some of those are like invitational, and they're just like, here's what's going on, and that would be a really good way to spend an evening or part of an evening to get that input in there. I mean, I think this grassroots kind of notion here, and this is kind of getting everybody on the same page. That's helpful for all of us, that it's not just necessarily coming from city staff, but it's coming from our commissioners and our council and other citizens that are like interested. That all helps. I highly encourage that, and I'll keep you guys abreast of that information as those open house and forums come out, and keep you posted, and we'll make sure you get notified of that. And they're
awesome.
ODOT, it's a long process, but it's going to end up like, I'm guessing over the next year, it's going to get more detailed. Our staff are attending these very long meetings, and sometimes you kind of like, you're not sure what was even discussed necessarily that relates to Canby, but it's important that we track this, and we're doing that. But these forums, these open forums would be a good chance to say, okay, what does that all mean for folks in Canby?
All right. Yeah, I would enjoy sitting in on some of the, like, if they are discussing like tolls or anything like that, or I'd be willing to go complain for a few minutes to help our city. So.
And that's great. I mean, the more help we can get on that, the better, because it's it's really, really a large project. We have other cities that are also concerned. Oregon City is concerned. And, I think and some of that is, our role. I've actually brought this up as a topic. I'm in a Clackamas County Planning Directors meeting about every 2 months, and I brought tolling up, and that resonated very strongly with the group. I said, this may be more Oregon City and Canby, but I wanted to bring it up, and everybody was interested in doing that. So I think there are other parties that are like out there saying the same thing, that want the same attention. ODOT just hasn't quite got there. But what you can do, Commissioner Hebe, is absolutely important and others to show up to these meetings and events and say, how does this play? And they'll probably have even informational cards to say, what are your interests? And the more they get of that, back to the Shawshank redemption analogy from Jason, same thing.
Well, and I'll just throw out too, you might want to check with the city attorney to see, like, if we attend these events, as far as the difference between attending it as a citizen and attending it as a member of the planning commission, and how we should do those sort of things, so that we don't get, so we don't get the city, so that we aren't overstepping our bounds and have the potential to get the city in trouble, in some sort of legal trouble.
Jason, I've been down that road a number of years ago when the issue of the library was coming up, and I chose to speak, and the question was I speaking as a private citizen or a planning commissioner? And as a private citizen, you can't speak for all of us unless we're all in agreement and you're the spokesperson. I mean, does that make sense?
I think the big thing is the quorum. When we went to some ethics training, when I first became a commissioner, one of the things they discussed is it's like, just don't accidentally form a quorum. You know, if a quorum meets at the bar and actually starts talking about commissioner business, even if it's something that's closed, it might go back to LUBA, and then it becomes an active issue. And then by having beers in a quorum, we got into trouble. You know, that could be a thing. And similarly, in an email chain, if you forward emails between enough commissioners to where that eventually you end up with quorum in that email chain, then there's also problems there. But I think that as long as we're individuals, and from what I've been told, you know, counselors are only counselors for their term, but commissioners are commissioners for life.
Yeah, I guess my part was like not so much the quorum thing, but if I'm like if I run into someone from ODOT at this event and they're like, "Who are you?" and I say, "Hi, I'm Jason Patton. I'm a member. I am a planning commissioner from the city of Canby," and then I start talking, you know, is that okay? Rather than, or should I say, "Hello, I'm Jason Patton. I am a citizen of Canby." That the representation of the position to others and what the conversation is, that's what I'm curious about. Not so much the quorum part of it.
Well, the quorum is what makes us effective. So I think as long as you don't have one, you're free.
Okay.
Commissioner Patton, I will ask council and get some input on that. As you know, I agree with Commissioner Hutchinson on the quorum piece. I just don't know what you should say. You know, am I representing the, you know, as a commissioner or just a citizen? That part I'm not sure, but the quorum clearly is a concern that, you know, you don't want to be like, okay, we made a decision against this project. You know, I mean, that would not be good. You know,
oh yeah, no,
that is, yeah.
I am very familiar with all that stuff. I know better than to do that.
Okay. We still don't have Commissioner Boatwright, I assume. So before we close down here for the evening, Commissioner Hutchinson, do you have any more thoughts that you would like to?
I don't in particular, actually. I think I feel awash in questions, and I think I need to let the staff go out and find us some answers. And I'm looking forward to seeing some plans.
Okay, that sounds like a good idea. Okay, any more thoughts on from anybody that before we close down? Otherwise, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Couple things real quick. I'm just going to bring these up and push them again.
Sure.
Again, I'm going to advocate for one topic per work session, per joint work session with the city council, and also joint work sessions on, if it needs to bleed into two, joint work sessions on before planning commission meetings, or in the case like this here, you know, if we have an open meeting, do a joint meeting work session as part of one of our regular meetings.
Jason, I couldn't agree more. I think that in the past, it's been my experience over the last 5 or 6 years, 7 years that I've been on the planning commission, that we have the city council agrees to have these joint work sessions once, and they feel generous and give it to us twice a year, and they last 60 to 90 minutes, and then there's no follow-up. And I'm gratified that we are having these joint work sessions more frequently, but it is really up to the city council to, I mean, we can push them, we can prod them, but to get them to actually move forward and take some action seems to be a bit of a challenge at times. That's my observation.
And Commissioner Patton, to your point, I 100% agree. When the late start didn't help us either on that last joint session, but I knew it was going to be tight, and it was even tighter because there was a lot of questions that came out of my presentation, more than I even was expecting, which is good, but I think those need to be separated. out. And so totally agree with that. And just a few things, Chair Savory. I will work to get another scheduled DKS. It will likely be our standard joint work session again, but just with DKS, but with the whole time committed to them with no interruptions. And so I wanted to say thank you for your comments, very appreciated, really good input. And we will not be having a hearing or work session on December 27th. Just as a note, we do plan to have the Alcata hearing on December 13th. That's our hope that will happen. We'll keep you posted on that. So there's a hearing there on December 13th we're planning. And I just wanted to wish you all a very happy Thanksgiving and holidays for everyone.
You as well, Don, and Lainey, you as well. So
You
and
too,
your-
John.
So I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Seconded.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much, and have a great week, folks. Talk to you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy
Happy
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.